And then in 1926, they bought the property on Lakeville Road and moved their operations there. Now, to give you an idea of how much sand and gravel was going out of Oxford, we had 5 major companies from the 1920s to the 1950s, 60s era. Oxford was producing 5.9 million ton a year of sand and gravel. That is huge. And that is why we became known as the gravel capital of the world, right? We have the bar downtown called the Gravel Capital Brewery. So to give you an idea, freight was super cheap. Train freight was super cheap to ship that kind of thing, and they charged by the ton. And Koenig in 1926, according to the newspapers, they did $1.8 million in train fees in 1926. So that's a lot of money today, let alone in 1926. So that's what essentially Oxford became, the sand gravel capital of the world. Okay, and so 5.9 million ton of sand and gravel a day. And according to Jack Leroy, who is the local historian here in Oxford, he was a police officer and a fire chief for a long time. Today he says there's not a highway east of the Mississippi that doesn't have Oxford sand and gravel in it. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about 2 more people, 2 more little events here, and be kind of really quick with it because I know we're kind of on a time crunch here. Because the sand and gravel is all plentiful here in Oxford, that attracts other businesses to us, okay? Actually, right here. So this is the Smith Silo Company, started by Hiram Smith in 1907. Silos were a big deal in the early 1800s. You had basically 3 different kinds, right? You had brick, you had wood, and you had a mix of concrete and stone. The brick ones would shift and break, go figure, you're building on sand, right? And then you had the wooden ones, which would burn down, spontaneous combust with corn dust and things like that. And then also the cement and rock would also do the exact same thing. So he came up with a design, which you have right here. And these are basically giant bricks that they make out of concrete. And they put them on a vibrating machine to get all the bubbles out of them. And then what they do is they put them together like a pergo floor, like Legos. And they put steel cables and wrap those cables around them. And they became the trademark or the standard for the industry at that time. Because what happens is you have to keep your cow and all your food for your animals in the farm, you had to keep it fresh. If it got wet or mildew or moldy in the wintertime, it was done and you couldn't feed your animals. A lot of farmers actually would sell off their livestock at the end of fall and then rebuy in the spring so they don't have to keep them fed through the winter. But with this kind of technology, and he became the standard right there, the Smith Silo Company that he started in 1930. And his son, Warren Smith, they actually started out in Paw Paw, Michigan, and they're having all the sand and gravel shipped up there. And they finally said, wait a minute, let's just move to Oxford where the sand and gravel is, and we don't have to ship it, you know what I mean? They saved a ton of costs. So in 1930, they come to Oxford and establish the Smith Silo Company. And there it is over at 98 Glaspie Street. This is actually where the water plant is today, and you have Scripter Park right here next to it. And that's where, these are all the blocks that you see right here. If you're familiar with Seymour Lake Park here in Oxford, on Seymour Lake Road there, if you go in there, halfway through, there's a big rain shelter. It's made with the Smith Silo technology. It's got all the blocks with the steel cables around it, and this is an example right here. You see the blocks all together, steel cables, and you'll know it's a true Smith Silo because other companies started kind of replicating that technology if it's got the block in the middle of it. And I don't know if you saw the township's Facebook post today, but a friend of the museum, he has one of those blocks, and they took pictures of it today and posted it, and that's kind of neat. Also, if you go to Lake Orion, and there's Kentucky Fried Chicken, if you go behind there, the start of the Paint Creek Trail, there's a house made out of Smith Silo blocks, and that was one of the Smith family members who built that house. And it's a circle house with steel cables around it, kind of an interesting thing. So, like I said, I'm going to try to skip through this a little bit. The next thing Oxford's famous for, not so much the settlers, but what we're famous for, the Lone Ranger. Brace Beamer was the voice of the radio Lone Ranger from 1941 to 1954. He was the 3rd voice of the Lone Ranger. The second one, Earl Grasser, it was a live show that they did, and they think he may have fallen asleep on the way home from the studio and crashed his car and passed away. So Brace Beamer was actually the announcer for the show. He would actually do the introduction, and he'd also do advertisements during the show. And they said, hey, can you step in and fill in? He said, sure. And he did the hi-yo silver, big, deep, boisterous voice, and they loved it. And so they said, you're it. You're the next one. 20 million listeners weekly. It was syndicated across the entire country. He passed away in 1965, and he had a house over on Drainer Road before you get to Newman on the north side. It's a baby blue-looking Victorian home. And so he had 300 acres there. And in 1965, when he passed away, his wife sold a lot of that property to the Churko Brothers Construction Company. We have Churko Road right there. And the first court in Churko Brothers Sub is Beamer Court, right? So there's kind of that. Now, his next door neighbor house is actually where he kept the one of his horses, Silver. It was a little red, like one stall barn kind of thing. Today, somebody bought it. It's a 2,000 square foot pool house. It still has the Hi-Ho Silver sign on it, but not quite the same, right? And the last thing I'm going to talk about here is Ray Road. Is everyone familiar with Ray Road, north of town? Okay. This is named after Cornelius Nathaniel Ray III. His family, his father and his grandfather were involved in the United Fuel Company, Ray Industries, Ray Road, right? Sand and gravel. They came from Detroit. Well, his name was Cornelius Nathaniel Ray III. That's an interesting name. I don't think he liked it very much. His dad and his grandfather went by Corny. He was a World War II fighter pilot. He didn't want to go by Corny. I mean, come on, you know. So he would go by sometimes Connie, his family would call him. Other times he'd go by his initials, CN Ray or C period Ray is what he would go by. So in 1959, a friend of his introduced him. He said, you got to check out this company. It's called Carcraft out of Detroit. And what they're doing is they are making fiberglass boats with this material fiberglass, and they were making cheap coffins and golf cart bodies and little fishing boats. And he saw that and said, you know what? I bet you I could do something bigger with that. So he hires Harl Early Associates, and he starts making bigger boats, and of course, it turns into Sea Ray Boats. Today, this is the Legacy Center on north side of Oxford. This was the original plant for Sea Ray Boats. Today, it's 2,000 square feet, but they kept building onto it in the 60s and 70s, and so Sea Ray Boats started here, and then, unfortunately, all great things have to come to an end. In 1986, they sold to the Brunswick Company for $300 million plus $50 million in stock options. And then when they did that, they ended up closing the plant in 1991. And they said that they had an overstock or an overabundance of mid-sized boats. And of course, the early 90s were big SUVs, big boats, gas was cheap, right? So they wanted to make bigger boats. So instead of retooling the factory, they went ahead and shut it down, which was unfortunate because 100 different people had lost their jobs. But Sea Ray Boats started right here in Oxford as well. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We took you through the history of Oxford in that short amount of time, right? We started out with the creation of the earth, and we have the early settlers. So if you have any questions, I can try to answer them for you. If not, you can come up here afterwards and ask me, and yeah, that'll be it. Any questions off the bat?
How did they crush rock in those days?
With crushing plants, the same thing. Giant stones, and they would just crush them on top of them. Now, how they actually lift them up, I don't know in the early days. I know in the 1912s they had steamer shovels, so they had cranes, so they had the technology to pick things up. And today they have crushing plants. They filter all the sand and gravel into it, and it sorts it out by different sizes. And the bigger stuff is crushed with big blocks. Now, there was rumor that Koenig was actually going to close down and turn into a development, right? That was kind of the idea. But then they built a brand new way station in there. Like, okay. Then they built a brand new crushing plant and a brand new washing plant. Then they ran all new electric in there. We said, there's no way they're going to do that. This place is just reopening, kind of. So that's what that is. So, thank you for. Oh yeah, another question. Yeah.
Is there any truth to what I've heard as the Purple Gang hanging out in Stony Lake area?
That's interesting. There's the answer is kind of yes and kind of no. When you have criminal bandits, they're not making themselves well known. They're like, hey, we live here, kind of thing. We can tell you that they did live on Bellevue Island in Lake Orion. They did have a house in Bellevue Island on Lake Orion. They were actually interviewing a neighbor. What they did was, of course, they're criminal enterprise kind of thing. What they did was they bought a house, they fixed it up, they maintained it really well, and then they wined and dined all the neighbors. They would have big parties, and they'd have everybody come, free champagne, free caviar, ice sculpture, carving, that kind of, had these huge parties, and people loved it. They wined and dined and said, hey, why don't we pave the road in here? We'll take care of that for you, So the neighbors were just like, oh my gosh, starstruck kind of thing. And so they were interviewing the neighbors, like, what's it like living next to criminals? They're the best neighbors we've ever had, So sometimes you can live out in plain view by being nice to people. But as far as on Stony Lake, there was another gang that in Detroit, not the Purple Gang, but there was another Detroit gang that came out there, and they did a lot of safe cracking, and they would throw the safes into the lake, that kind of thing. And there was a doctor who was kidnapped, and there was some other stuff. But as far as the Purple Gang, mostly just rumors. We don't have any hard evidence of that like we do in Lake Orion. But anybody else? Questions? Oxford history? Anything?
I toured the Sea Ray plant.
Yeah.
With Dave Traylor, he used to work there.
Yeah, okay.
So we had Indian guides, it used to be a YMCA,
Yeah.
and I think it's Jesse, I think we went through the Sea Ray plan.
Yeah. We did with Christian Service Brigade as well. And and when the wind would blow a certain way, you could always smell the fiberglass in town. You know. Yeah.
Now you smell marijuana.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Another question.
Is this the kind of talk you do for the classes, the school classes?
Not yet. I'd like to get into the schools and teach local history, but they're not interested right now. But we do bring a lot of the elementary schools come to the museum in the spring. So we have groups of 30 kids or more, and we split them up in the museum and teach this kind of history to them. Obviously not.
In the museum, you could hear it.
Yes, absolutely. So you're welcome to come to the museum. We're open Thursdays and Saturdays from 1 to 4. That's one weekday and one weekend day based on our volunteer staff. And we'd love to have you come in.